Our friend legal analyst Jeremy Rosenthal, who has helped us make sense of this trial. He joins me. Jeremy, good to see you yet again. Happy Friday here. All right, if Hunter Biden's your client, do you bring him up to testify on the witness stand? What would you do?
Oh, never.
Okay.
The guy's got too much to lose. It would make sense in some ways for his trial theory. His trial theory being he's an addict. Addicts aren't clear-headed. He's lying to himself and not the government when he's filling out that form saying he doesn't use or is not an addict. I mean, denial is a real thing, right? And self-reflection and self-awareness is just not a strong suit of somebody who's addicted to something. You talk to somebody who drinks alcohol on a regular basis, all day, every day, and they're going to say that they're not an alcoholic. Hunter Biden, if he took the stand, could actually try to convince the jury of that, and may just he might be able to sell it. I don't know, probably not. But he's got so many other headaches, so many other legal problems that the prosecutor could potentially hit him on. Okay. He's got his tax issues. He's got some of his business entanglements. And it's kind of like when you watch a client testify in their own defense, it's kind of like a thread from a sweater that you just pull and pull and pull, and it gets ugly. You multiply by 3 how bad you think it is. That's why Hunter Biden wouldn't testify if I was talking to him.
Can prosecutors, though, on the cross-examination, can they bring all of that other baggage in to this trial, or does the judge have to make that decision?
Not necessarily, and that's a really good question, Andrew. What the way that you would be able to do that is by called opening the door. Okay. So when Hunter Biden is testifying on his own direct examination, if he can keep a really tight scope of what he's talking about and he keeps it to this case, it's possible the prosecution couldn't do that. But all it takes is him saying something like, I've never been in trouble before, or I have no other issues, or I have nothing to hide, or a statement like that. And if the judge says, all right, you've opened the door to something else, then the prosecution can go right in. A lawyer, as a lawyer, we trust ourselves to argue and talk. We very rarely trust our clients to do that. They very rarely can walk that tightrope properly. Okay. And it's a huge downside if he's not able to pull that off.
Okay. Jeremy, the central question is, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the prosecution has to prove that Hunter Biden was an addict, a drug addict, while he filled out this form to purchase and possess a weapon, right? Isn't that the only question? Are they any closer to that? I mean, they rested today on day 5. Did we get an answer on that question or not?
I think that they've hit that issue 10 ways till Sunday. They've proved that he used well before. They've proved that he used after. They've had his own memoir in a book in his own voice that was read to them. They had Hallie Biden, who was Beau Biden's widow. He had a romantic interlude with her. I think she experimented with some illicit drugs. Obviously, Hunter being addicted to those drugs. She got up, said there were text messages almost contemporaneously the day after and 2 days afterwards that said that he was using or about to use. So I think they've really covered that issue. If anything, the one thing you want to be really careful of is you don't want to beat up the guy and be such a bully that you turn him into the victim. Yeah. And you can really turn this guy into the victim. You've got his family crying in the front row. You've got an addict, just like Mr. Turley was talking about. You've got an addict who's taking ownership of his problem. That's a soft target. And if you beat him up too bad, you become the bad guy. He becomes the victim. And then you are talking about an acquittal.
Yeah. I just bring up whether or not he can bring in all of the other baggage of the foreign business entanglements, because I think it's worth reminding the viewers that he has another indictment hanging over him. On the tax evasion questions, that trial will begin sometime in September in Los Angeles. So this isn't, going away. The legal troubles for Hunter Biden not going away anytime soon here. But from a personal level, if you're Hunter Biden and your brother's widow, your former girlfriend, she's up on the stand, Hallie Biden yesterday, your daughter, Naomi Biden, is on the stand yesterday talking about their experiences dealing with Hunter Biden's drug abuse and drug use. That just must be so heartrending to listen to, so emotional. Like I said, we were speaking yesterday, it really is a family affair in the courtroom in Wilmington, Delaware. I mean, Jill Biden, the First Lady of the United States, she was in France yesterday, flew back for day 5 today. She was there in the court. You can tell how close, yes, this family is, that they're with Hunter Biden during this ordeal, but it must be really, really hard for him, just from a human perspective. I mean, that's not a legal analysis at all, just from a human perspective.
Trial sucks really hard, and it takes years off your life, and it's extraordinarily hard on your family. You see the Bidens, they're largely together. They've shown a lot of support, and it's very painful for them. We saw last week, Eric Trump and Donald Jr. Those guys were unglued with the proceedings. It's very emotional, and it's emotional for everybody involved, particularly the family. And your point, Andrew, is I think one that we all do have to pay attention to. A lot of times, as lawyers, we get so wrapped up in the X's and the O's. We get so wrapped up in footnote 38. We get so wrapped up in all these things that we forget about the emotional quotient. When the jury comes back from deliberating, a lot of times their first question will be, was that his mother in the stand? Was that his wife in the stand? We figured something like that, but that's a lot of times their first observations. So those emotions are things that the lawyers really have to take into account.
Okay. Jeremy, lastly, on the Hunter Biden trial, this question too. President Biden, while in France, was interviewed by ABC News' David Muir, asking about the Hunter trial, about how his son has been holding up, and asked him straight up, would you pardon your son, Hunter Biden? President Biden demurred it, but then said no, that he would rule that out. You know, I had a lot of people ask me yesterday, you know, do I believe that? Do you buy that? Would President Biden not do such a thing? I mean, how uncharacteristic, unusual, rare would that be? I mean, this is a presidential election year. It remains to be seen on if, of course, you know, President Biden will win a second term, or if it will be former President Trump. Maybe this all wraps up before the election. But he says he's not going to pardon. Do you think he will or won't?
You know, I'm a trial lawyer, so I try to stay in my lane. It would seem pretty damaging politically for him to say yes to that question. Maybe he's somebody who gets pardoned on the last day of his office. Maybe Donald Trump pardons him, right? Donald Trump has made a lot of hay off of Hunter Biden. Yep. The most famous witness in this case being Hunter Biden's laptop, right? So maybe Donald Trump pardons him for all of it. Probably not.
Okay.
But yeah, you would think that prior to the election, of course, Joe Biden is going to say that, and maybe as a last on his way out the door, maybe that's one of those last-second clemency issues. But I would doubt it.
Okay. Jeremy, stay with us. We just want to take a quick commercial break, though. When we come back, we're moving from Wilmington there to New York City, Jeremy. I think it's pretty safe to say a major bombshell just dropped this afternoon in the Trump hush money payment trial. The case, we're hearing from the judge about a social media post from the relative of a juror. We'll have it after the break. Judge Juan Merchan just sent this letter to the parties informing them of a comment that was left on the New York State Unified Court System's Facebook page, May the 29th. That's the day before the verdict. The comment reads, quote, "My cousin is a juror," and says Trump is getting convicted. Thank you, folks, for all your hard work, exclamation point, ×4. The comment was posted regarding oral arguments in the 4th Department of the Appellate Division, which is unrelated to the case. So I would say, and I think it's safe to say, this is quite significant. According to our sources at Fox, a Trump campaign official telling Fox News Digital, quote, "We are investigating the matter." We're also learning from our sources at Fox the comment appears to be deleted from the Facebook page. A court spokesperson says this to Fox, quote, "As appropriate, the court informed the parties once it learned of this online content." So I want to put up the tweet here of the letter. I have the letter in my hand. Molly Crane Newman, she's a court reporter for the New York Daily News. And that's the quote from the Facebook post. "My cousin is a juror," and says Trump is getting convicted. Thank you, folks, for all your hard work. All right, we got to bring in Jeremy Rosenthal yet again to talk about this. I'm sure he has lots of thoughts about this. Okay, Jeremy, a lot of people are talking about online this very comment saying, okay, conviction, it's going to be vacated, it's going to be overturned, this was a mistrial, they don't even have to appeal it because of this very comment. Is that accurate? Is that how these things work here?
It's how they begin, and it's, again, kind of talking again about the sweater where you pull the thread. It can turn into that, but there's a long way to go. The law favors finality of judgments, and the law also favors leaving jurors alone and kind of letting them do their service. We want people to show up for jury duty. We don't want them to have to serve in perpetuity, and we don't want them really harassed after the fact. So there are privileges which prevent jurors from testifying. So to be clear, here's the steps that the Trump team needs to take. They need to get to the bottom of this. The judge alerted them to it, didn't have to do that. Very appropriate for Judge Marchand to do that. He alerted the Trump defense team of that and give them enough information to start investigating. They have to get to whether or not this thing is true. And then if it's true, they have to be able to file a motion that's got some legs behind it, that's going to show enough cause to kind of break through some of those privileges that are going to allow the jurors to testify. If there's a leak on that jury and there's some truth to this, then the issue becomes, okay, was there juror misconduct? And did the misconduct result in an unfair deliberations for Mr. Trump? So this is kind of how these things start. Okay. They're a long way from making any hay with this, but this is how it goes. And I think we talked about it, right? That in the days and weeks after the fact, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for these types of issues. This jury was not sequestered. That was an issue. Maybe this is something, maybe it's nothing. In kind of looking at this issue before you and I talked, I saw a Politico report, and it was a very vague report. I'm not them, that it appears that this could be a troll who regularly trolls the New York court systems and their social media. But Donald Trump and his team ought to, and very likely will, very aggressively investigate this. Okay.
Jeremy, I have the letter in front of me. You're saying that Judge Juan Merchan, he didn't have to notify Todd Blanche, Trump's lead defense counsel, and/or Josh Steinglass, the assistant district attorney, but he did. But that's not court procedure. He didn't have to do that.
I wouldn't think so, no. The prosecutor has a duty to turn over information to a criminal defendant. That information is called Brady information, and I'm sure the viewers are really familiar that that's evidence that shows innocence. This is not Brady information, and the judge is not the prosecutor. So I'm not aware of any duty unless there's a New York statute that requires the court to turn this over, because probably there was a long conversation with the social media folks and the court people deciding, well, what do we do about this, right? Yeah. And the judge says, well, I'm going to send this guy's lawyer something, and I'm going to send the prosecutor the same thing. Yeah. And they're within what's called the time that the court has plenary power, which means that the judgment is not final and the court can still hear this. If we learned about this 2 years from now, it may very well be too late.
All right, Live Now Look there in New York City. We know the sentencing date for Trump is set for July the 11th. But, Jeremy, we're talking about jurors after the fact. The comment implies that a juror said something about what the verdict might be before the verdict was rendered, and I wouldn't even know, how that could happen. I mean, how could that happen? You could have one juror say to their relative, this is how I'm feeling, but they don't speak for the whole jury. No, that's right. And the jury was still out at that point. So one juror who says, we're going to go convict him, and that, look, let's investigate it. Trump's team is going to investigate it. Trump is fortunate that his team has the resources to investigate it. And then let's see what comes of it. But it sometimes, like I said, it's the start of the thread getting pulled. Sometimes it's something, sometimes it's nothing. Yeah, you would imagine whatever the investigation looks like, that they can determine quite quickly, if it is some type of bot or troll on the New York court Facebook page. Lastly, though, what do you think Alvin Bragg, his team of prosecutors in their office today, when they got this news, are they worried or are they taking it, calmly, so to speak? I mean, should the Bragg team be worried about this?
I think their initial reaction was, oh, insert four-letter word. I mean, they didn't do anything wrong here, and this threatens their conviction. There's nothing worse than working really hard on a case like this for a long, long time, and then something completely out of your control, spinning it out of control. They'll deal with it. They know the law on it, and they'll do what they can. But due process. Mr. Trump's going to have the ability to see if there's something here, and then we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, is this an arrow in the quiver of the Trump appeal effort, do you think?
Could be.
Okay.
Again, we'll see what comes of it. But it ultimately, if it turns out that there's some legs to this and this is real, and then the judge says, well, we're not going to have a hearing about it, that could be problematic. All
right. And Jeremy, just lastly, because I'm thinking of these questions on the fly, I have so many for you. I was back in Michigan earlier this week visiting family, visiting friends. A lot of people were asking me about the Trump guilty verdict. And a lot of their questions centered around the fact, why do you think we haven't heard from one of the jurors yet? It's been more than a week. It's not that much time, but you would have imagined maybe, I don't know if you think this, that one of them might have spoken out, that maybe they would have gotten some type of exclusive interview, wrote on social media. I mean, we have this comment on the New York State Court Facebook page, but that's from a quote-unquote relative of a juror, not a juror. So do you think we're going to hear from them soon or not? I mean, they're free to go about their daily lives and not talk about this ever again, but kind of human nature would seem dictates that maybe you want to talk about that. That's a pretty big life moment for any of these 12 people.
I hadn't given that a lot of thought, honestly, Andrew, but I think you're right. If we were going to hear from these folks, we probably would have heard from them by now. Maybe somebody's getting a book deal that we don't know about. If somebody's going to speak up, it doesn't do Donald Trump any good unless they do it right now or just immediately after some kind of sentencing. So we'll see. Also, maybe the jury was admonished, look, he still hasn't been sentenced. Don't go out and say anything publicly. That could influence it. But yeah, I'm with you. I think we would have heard it by now.
All right. Jeremy Rosenthal, as always, thanks for going a little long with us today on this Friday. Always a lot to get to. Have a good weekend, Jeremy.
Thanks, Andrew. You too.